The rat lay stiff beside the coal pile, its glassy eyes staring at nothing in particular, just another piece of filth in a place already thick with grime. No one questioned it because no one ever did. Boiler rooms were not clean places. They were not inspected with care. They were places where men worked quickly, impatient to leave, trusting routine more than vigilance. Steam hissed through iron pipes that had not been shut down since dawn. Metal ticked as it expanded under pressure. Boots echoed against concrete, slow, unhurried, belonging to men who believed they were far from danger. A shovel scraped the floor and lifted coal into the furnace mouth. Black stones tumbled forward, swallowed by fire, feeding the machine that powered the building above. Heat climbed, pressure followed. Everything behaved exactly as it always had. The system was stable, predictable, safe. Then the rat went in with the coal. There was no ticking sound to betray it. No spark, no fuse burning down, no warning that would trigger instinct or panic. For a fraction of a second, nothing changed at all. Then the explosion came from inside the furnace itself, violent and unnatural, as if the machine had turned against its own operators. Steel tore outward, pipes ruptured, fire inverted direction, bursting through seams never meant to release it. The blast ripped through the boiler room, killing power, shattering infrastructure, and leaving men scrambling through smoke and steam without understanding what had just happened. By morning, the facility was dead, sabotaged without gunfire, without witnesses, without a single Allied operative ever stepping foot inside the building. German investigators searched for timers, wires, planted charges, anything that looked like an attack. They found nothing. What destroyed the boiler had been discarded as refuse before it ever became a weapon. That was the genius of it. The British Special Operations Executive understood a brutal truth early in the war. Sabotage was easy in theory and almost impossible in practice. Explosives were loud, timers failed, delayed fuses were unreliable. Silent weapons required training most resistance fighters did not have. Guns got people caught. Bombs drew attention. Even successful attacks often ended with the operator dead or captured. The enemy adapted quickly, increasing patrols, tightening inspections, searching bags, pockets, and bodies for anything suspicious. The problem wasn't killing Germans. The problem was destroying the systems that allowed Germany to function while keeping the people doing the work alive long enough to strike again. Factories, rail yards, power stations, and boiler houses were guarded, but not in the way frontline positions were. They relied on routine, on predictability, on the belief that danger came from outside, not from within. Guards searched for weapons, not refuse. They inspected crates, not trash. They watched hands, not shovels. British planners realized that if a weapon looked like a weapon, it was already compromised. The solution they arrived at was as uncomfortable as it was effective. They took one of the most common sights in industrial spaces, one of the most ignored objects in occupied Europe, and turned it into a delivery system for destruction. A dead rat. Something no one wanted to touch. Something no one wanted to look at twice. Something that belonged exactly where it would be used. The rat bombs were real, manufactured in Britain, carefully prepared with plastic explosives sewn into the body cavity, designed to detonate only when thrown into fire. The explosive itself was stable, inert, until subjected to the intense heat of a furnace. The rat was preserved just enough to maintain its shape, convincing enough to pass a glance, revolting enough to discourage inspection. There was no trigger, no mechanism to discover. Its lethality came entirely from human behavior. Someone would always throw it away. Someone would always choose fire. From an engineering standpoint, it was absurdly simple, and that was precisely why it worked. There were no moving parts to fail, no timing to miscalculate, no sound signature. The blast occurred at the point of maximum vulnerability, when pressure was already high and systems were under stress. The explosion itself did not need to be large. It only needed to rupture containment. Once that happened, Physics did the rest. The Germans had nothing comparable because they never thought in those terms. Their sabotage devices were mechanical, rigid, engineered to look dangerous. British intelligence weaponized social habits instead. They built a device that relied on disgust, routine, and human laziness. It did not defeat German technology. It defeated German assumptions. In occupied Europe, resistance fighters were trained not to admire the device, but to respect it. Instructions were simple. Do not handle it longer than necessary. Do not store it. Do not carry it farther than required. Place it where it will be discarded into fire. Walk away. Never look back. There would be no confirmation, no visible success, no explosion to witness. If it worked, the effect would be discovered hours later, often miles away. In one documented operation, a resistance courier slipped into a rail yard at night and dropped the rat near a coal pile beside a locomotive shed. No guards noticed. By dawn, the engine was destroyed. Its boiler ruptured beyond repair, its crew injured or dead, its rail line crippled for days. Investigators blamed poor maintenance. Sabotage was suspected, but no method could be identified. No evidence remained. In another case, rats were placed near factory furnaces powering munitions production. When the blast came, it tore through infrastructure rather than personnel, killing output without creating martyrs or public executions. This was sabotage without spectacle, which was exactly what made it effective. The psychological impact on German forces was disproportionate to the damage itself. Boilers began failing inexplicably. Power systems ruptured without warning. Furnaces exploded in facilities considered secure. Guards grew paranoid, not of enemies, but of the environment around them. Trash became suspicious. Dead animals were suddenly examined, which slowed operations and bred fear. Morale suffered because there was no visible enemy to fight. Only the constant sense that the infrastructure itself could turn lethal at any moment. Countermeasures were attempted. Orders were issued to inspect boiler rooms, to examine refuse, to burn trash elsewhere. But these measures required time and discipline breaks under routine pressure. Every added step slowed production. Every inspection admitted vulnerability. And even then, one missed rat was enough. Compared to other Allied weapons, the rat bomb stood alone. Silenced pistols required proximity and skill. Timed explosives required precision and luck. OSS gadgets were clever but often mechanical and delicate. The rat required none of that. It could be used by anyone. It left no trail. It exploited industrial physics rather than firepower. It was not designed to kill men directly, but to kill systems, which in war is often far more devastating. The Germans eventually learned of the concept, intercepting a shipment before it could be deployed, and the program was curtailed before mass use. But the idea itself had already done its damage. It proved that warfare did not always belong to the loud, the advanced, or the obvious. Sometimes it belonged to whoever understood human behavior best. The rat bomb was never meant to be remembered. It had no battlefield glory, no heroic footage, no medals attached to its use. It existed entirely in shadows, whispered about by resistance fighters who understood what it meant to destroy an enemy without being seen. It was ordinary. It was disgusting. It was unforgiving. And for a brief, unsettling moment in the war, it made the most powerful industrial machine in Europe afraid of its own furnaces.